Hi everyone, and welcome to Susan's Cooking School. Today I'm going to show you how to make these beautiful croissants.
The first step is to scald the milk, and then we'll let it cool down a little bit. Add 1 tablespoon of butter to the warm milk. Then add 3 tablespoons of sugar. This will help cool the milk down while dissolving the sugar and melting the butter. Add 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast to 6 fluid ounces of warm water. I like to use spring water so that there is no chlorine residual. Add 1 teaspoon of sugar and stir gently. Meanwhile, measure out 1 pound, 8 ounces of bread flour and add to that 2 teaspoons of salt. Time to prepare the butter. In between pieces of wax paper, roll out 12 ounces of chilled butter into approximately a 12-inch square. I like to use a knife or butter cutter to slice the butter first. There's less rolling out to do after. You could use a mallet instead of a rolling pin to flatten the butter. May need to rearrange the butter to keep it in a square shape. Just needs to be a little bigger. I'll roll this out a bit more and then I'll put it in the refrigerator while I make my dough. All done. Now it's time to make the dough. Our yeast mixture is activated, you can see that it's foamy, and our milk mixture has cooled to lukewarm. Add the milk and yeast mixtures to the flour and salt. Mix with a spoon until the ingredients are well incorporated, and then knead the dough on a lightly floured surface for about 1 to 2 minutes. The dough will be a little sticky, but resist the temptation to add a lot of extra flour. If the dough sticks, just add a little bit of flour to the surface and continue to knead. It will get less sticky as the gluten develops. Round the dough and place it back in the bowl and cover. Let the dough rest for 30 minutes. Now it's time to roll. I like to use a pastry cloth because I can use less flour for rolling out the dough. The dough has already begun to rise because it's a warm day. Don't worry if yours hasn't risen as much yet. Lightly flour your cloth or table and gently empty the dough on top. Lightly flour the dough and gently press out into a rectangular shape. Then roll out the dough to approximately 12 by 18 inches. Adjust it often so that it keeps its rectangular shape. I'm using my sheet pan as a measuring guide. It's almost the right size. Well, that should do it. Time to roll the butter in. Place the prepared butter over 2/3 of the dough and remove the wax paper. On both sides, of course. Fold the unbuttered side of the dough over the butter and then fold over again, encasing the butter in each fold. Gently seal the edges and roll the dough out. If the butter becomes too soft and starts oozing out, refrigerate the dough to firm it up again. Now roll the dough in the opposite direction and fold into thirds. I don't measure the dough at this time, I just try to roll it to an even thickness of about 1/2 of an inch. Place the dough in a plastic bag, sprinkled with a little flour, and let it rest for at least 5 minutes. If the kitchen is warm, rest the dough in the refrigerator. This is fold number 1. Okay, our dough is rested. Time to roll again. Sprinkle a little flour down on the table, roll the dough out again, and roll in the opposite direction of the previous roll. Fold again into thirds, and wrap the dough and put it in a cool place. This is fold number 2. Now for the final fold. Put a little flour on the table and dough. Roll again as before in the opposite direction. Fold again into thirds, wrap and refrigerate for 4 to 24 hours. This is fold number 3. Now it's time to make the croissants. Take the dough out of the fridge and roll out on a lightly floured surface to approximately 24 by 18 inches. Try to keep the edges square as you roll. This can take a little effort. Use as little extra flour as possible, just enough to prevent the dough from sticking. The rolling can be a little tough, so hang in there. When the dough is the desired size, trim the dough about a ½ inch around. Save these scraps for later. Mark the dough in half lengthwise and then cut. Then make little cuts along the edge of the dough at 6-inch intervals on each side. Cut diagonals across the dough and then cut more diagonals across to the other side, creating triangles. The 4 end pieces will be smaller than the rest. I like to set these aside and make chocolate-filled croissants with them. Score each piece of dough at the bottom of each triangle. Then roll up each one, gently stretching the dough away from you. Try not to press down on the dough. Now I'll just wrap some dark chocolate into the end pieces. You can make little pastry rolls out of the trimmings. Place the croissants on a parchment-lined or lightly greased sheet pan and cover. Let them rise until they're almost double in size. If possible, place the tray in a moist 80 to 90 degree Fahrenheit environment. You don't want the dough to get too warm or the butter will begin to melt out. For more information on the subject and to see how I made my own proof box, click to read my blog article. The croissants have risen. Time to brush with my egg wash. I'm doing something unorthodox here by putting sesame seeds on some of these. Don't tell anyone, okay? Ready to bake at 400 degrees for 15 to 20 minutes or until they're good looking. Time for them to come out. Here's the first batch and the second batch. The trimmings and chocolate filled. Remove them to a rack to cool. Can you smell that? Now it's time to eat. I won't say that these aren't quite a bit of work to make, but boy are they worth it. Remember that these freeze really well in plastic bags or containers. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe and keep baking.